Hey guys, Zach Keaton here. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite albums of the year so far, being Smoulder-Times of Obscene Evil and Wild Daring. Now, Smoulder is an epic doom metal band out of Toronto. They were formed in 2013, and I first heard about them from Banger TV just recently. If you don't know, the Smoulder vocalist is Banger TV's Sarah. So kind of an interesting little thing. Cool to see someone I've watched for a bit make some great music. Anyways, let's get into the music. Now, I would say the most kind of noticeable part about this album is the vocals. The vocals are really make this album stand out. It has great instrumentals, but ultimately, I think if it had a different vocalist or a different vocal style, it wouldn't be as good as it is. And that's because of Sarah, who we just talked about. She delivers some really interesting vocals. Not kind of those traditional pretty sounding vocals that you'd expect to hear from a female metal vocalist, like, Nightwish or whatnot. But they're a little bit more raw, a little bit more, not really texture, but they're just delivered in a way a little bit more aggressive and a little bit different from what you'd expect to hear from most female metal bands so far. And now as far as instrumentals go, I think it's actually a very catchy album. There's some great riffs on this album that really get you into the album, get you headbanging, get you going. And I think a lot of that is down to the bass work. This album features some very memorable bass lines that are incorporated in with guitar riffs, and there's a section in a few songs where they'll kind of alternate off. There will be a guitar riff and then a bass riff and then a guitar riff and a bass riff, and it kind of goes into a pattern. That's something maybe you haven't heard so much before. And I'd say this is an example of an album that uses bass in a way that really makes the album better, not just because it's an expected instrument to use. So props for that. Drumming is good. It's not anything, just absolutely mind-blowing. But it definitely carried the album together. It, had rhythm. It gave the album rhythm, and it made it, a bit of a more memorable album. Just because it had, just tight drumming. Wasn't anything to complain about with it. So most of these songs are basically fantasy songs. I'd say the first song on the album, which is the first one that was released, the first new song that was released. The album actually features two songs that come from prior recordings that have just been re-recorded. Those are The Sword Woman and Voyage of the Sun Chasers. Maybe it's Sun Chaser, I don't know. But those are re-recorded. They sound actually much better, so I'd say it's warranted. But then the other four songs in the album are new. And of the new songs, I'd say my favorite is probably Alien of Garathorn. I think it's Garathorn. It could be something else. It's something similar sounding. And that features some very memorable vocals, some super catchy lines, some good instrumental parts, some good riffs. And I'd say that's kind of a constant throughout the whole album. There's not really anything, it's just kind of all around a very solid album. Maybe the final song, The Black God's Kiss, would be the only song that I maybe, can have a small gripe with. And that's just because it gets a little repetitive. I actually was very reminded of Rainbow's Light in the Dark with this song, just because they're both kind of a little maybe overly progressive endings to great albums, both repetitive, and I think both of them could be better. But if you're a band getting compared to Rainbow, I don't know that you can do much better than that. That's pretty great. So even though that's not my favorite song, it's still a good song, and overall it doesn't really detract too much from the album. Alright, sorry for that little interruption. Anyways, as I was saying, there maybe are a few small spots on the album that I have some small complaints with, just because they're not the most distinct, and they can get a little repetitive. But that's not anything that happens across the album. I'd say all around the album has more than enough variation to keep it interesting. It's one of the few albums that I can think of recently that I've listened to like multiple times back to back. Last night I was listening to the album, and I'm like, what else should I do? What else should I listen to? Figured, it's great, let's just listen to it again. And so if it's an album that you can, listen to multiple times in a row without getting bored, I'd say it's doing its job, because ultimately music is meant to entertain. So if the album is entertaining, it's awesome. And as I said before, it's a lot more than entertaining. So yeah, I'd say overall this is a great album. And I think maybe a complaint that some people might have with it is that it's not the most original. It definitely draws a lot from more retro bands. But last night I was trying to look for some bands similar to Smoulder, going through looking for female vocalists in epic doom metal bands. And I discovered a few kind of interesting bands, but I can't say that I found anything too similar to Smoulder. I'd say, Smoulder definitely draws inspiration from bands in the past, but they are far from a cover band. They're putting out their own new music. They're putting out interesting music that's had a lot of thought put into it. And I'd say they're kind of on the perfect threshold for a band that draws inspiration from the past, but still improves on it enough to make it their own thing. Maybe like Dark and Nocturne Slaughter Cult, which I will be reviewing pretty soon, their new album. I just listened to that, great album. Also another band with female vocalist, although probably be a little harder to notice. As well as that, I will be reviewing the new Waldgeflüster album pretty soon, as well as the new Waste of Space Orchestra album. So those are some things to look forward to. Oh, I just realized I did not give Times of Obscene, Evil, and Wild Daring a numerical value out of 10. So I think overall, I'd say I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. A great album. Like I said, there are a few things I would not mind, seeing changed around, but in the grand scheme of things, those don't really impact the album too negatively. And overall, I'd say it's probably, so far, maybe my easily top 3 favorite albums of 2019 so far. Alright. Stay tuned for further reviews. I'm gonna try and do these a lot more frequently than I have been. So, yeah. Keep tuning in. See you later. This has been, and still is, Zach Keaton. Be yourself, or whatnot. I don't know, that's just kind of a generic little, stay true to yourself. Alright.